Hello. Well, welcome to our first ever virtual John Monteith Legacy Society celebration event from Legacy to Catalyst, the Peony Garden and the next 100 years. I'm Sally Baker, Senior Director of Plan Giving for the University of Michigan. I'm delighted that so many of our Monteith Society members could join us today from around the country. The Monteith Society honors the vision and foresight of John Monteith, a founder and the first president of the University of Michigan. Monteith was a leader who helped lay the groundwork for higher education in Michigan and beyond. Today, we honor the vision and the foresight of all of you, those with the vision and foresight to generously invest in the future of the University of Michigan. You are leaving a legacy that will make an impact for generations to come. Thank you. A few housekeeping items before we begin. Questions can be asked by using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and can be typed into the Q&A window at any time during the event. Live captioning is available today. To view captions, click on Live Transcript in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and then choose Show Caption, Show Subtitle. Now I'm pleased to introduce Tom Baird, Vice President for Development for the University of Michigan. Tom is a U of M alumnus with more than 25 years of experience in higher education philanthropy at Michigan. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Sally, for that very kind introduction today. It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you this afternoon. We are so grateful to the members of the Monteith Society for your foresight, your generosity, and for the legacy that you have chosen to leave here at the University of Michigan. It's because of people like you that Michigan has endured so many storms over the last 2 centuries, and that has included wars, depressions, recessions, and yes, global pandemics. And when I put all of this into perspective, I realize how critical our family of donors have been to ensure that we continue to serve our public mission through the crises of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So this year has been challenging for so many of us in so many different ways, but through it all, the steady support that has been built over time by people like you has really made all the difference. Through COVID-19, we were able to expand financial support for students who needed emergency help during this period with their education. Our research operation continued in a strong way with Michigan Medicine continuing care for the most critical patients in the region. This and more is only possible thanks to people like you. And our donors have continued to be very generous along the way. In fact, we just announced 2 really wonderful gifts over the last couple of weeks. One, the Eisenberg family provided $30 million to the university to support the Francis and Kenneth Eisenberg and Family Depression Center. We also received a large gift from Carol and Harold Cohn that was a total of $17 million towards social policy work at the Ford School of Public Policy. Now, it's not just the big gifts that matter. This year, we had a number of young adults, and this statistic really impressed me, alums in their 20s and 30s who have made bequest commitments, and they have been inspired by the leadership and the example that all of you have set. They know that a commitment now will grow over time to support the place that they love for many, many generations to come. So I want to thank everyone for all that you've done for this university. It has already made an incredible difference. So next, we're going to hear about a lasting legacy that started over a century ago. The beloved Peony Garden at Nichols Arboretum. The original peonies were given in 1922 by Dr. W.E. Upjohn, and that family, the Upjohn family, still supports Michigan through the Monteith Society. We really appreciate it. So at this point, I'm pleased to introduce a couple of people who can talk about what's happening with the gardens now and what the future will bring. First, I want to introduce Tony Kalenic. He's director of Monteith Botanical Gardens and Nichols Arboretum, and he just started his role in March. So he just joined us recently, but he does return to Michigan after serving as Associate Dean for Research and Strategic Initiatives at the University of Florida. We also have with us David Michener. He is a curator at Monteith Nichols, and he works closely with students on the living collections. With that, Tony and David, welcome. It's so great to have you here this afternoon.
Thank you, Tom. Much appreciated, and greetings, everyone. As Tom said, my name is Tony Kalenic. I'm the new director of the Monteith Botanical Gardens and Nichols Arboretum here at the University of Michigan. For those of you that don't know, our organization includes the Monteith Botanical Gardens on Dixboro Road, the campus farm, which is hosted at the Botanical Gardens, Horner Woods and the Mud Lake Bog near Whitmore Lake, and of course the Arboretum, which includes the peonies, the topic of our presentation today. But that's really what MBGNA has. That's not really what MBGNA is or does. And while our amazing sites and collections offer our visitors an immersive experience into and relationship with the natural world, what really animates MBGNA and makes it belong to the University of Michigan's tapestry is that it's a unique living laboratory full of faculty and student research, curricular connections, and opportunities for meaningful public impact in a variety of areas. And that's not only true of our campus farm or with the botanical gardens, but even places you wouldn't expect, like the peonies. In a moment, my colleague, Dr. David Michener, is going to show you what's happening at our peony gardens, which are about to bloom, by the way. And at first, you will see beautiful images of beautiful flowers. And while the peonies are indeed beautiful, they are, when it's all said and done, driven by purpose. They're a site for interdisciplinary scholarship and creative practice that could only happen at the University of Michigan, all made possible by the legacy established by the Upjohn family and their family's support over time. And I hope by the time Dr. Michener is done speaking, you'll see not just peonies, but genomics research, virology, gender studies, 20th century American history, the history of global trade, and even small business practices, all intertwined. So as the peony garden's first century comes to a close and its next century begins to unfold, I invite Dr. Michener to discuss where the peony garden has been and where it's going in the century ahead. David?
Thank you, Tony. It's great to be here today with the Monteith Society, and I hope many of you have been to the peony garden over the years and the decades, and perhaps for some, even the generations. The peony garden is simply beloved. There's no question about it that it's an Ann Arbor institution all of its own, and most people come and revel in the gardens. And if you want to come and have great pictures without people, well, we still haven't figured out when that is, because there are always people in the peony garden when it's in bloom. Next slide, please. Dr. Upjohn, the founder of the Upjohn Pharmaceutical Company and U of M class of 1875, and by the way, his 4 siblings, women and men, all received their degrees from the U of M. Dr. Upjohn loved peonies, in part because they bloomed on his birthday, June 5th. He had one of the largest private collections in the country at the time, covering parts of 14 acres. And for various reasons, he thought that the U of M needed to have a collection, exactly where it is, as seen here in this picture from around 1928. For those of you who walk through the peony garden, you'll recognize it. And it's important to note that it's almost full. He wanted the best peonies for students to understand. Underneath it, there's probably a pharmacy reason too. Next image, please. The peony garden fell into a period of what I will just call non-use by the university. And by the 1990s, when I arrived, the part of the question was, what should visitors make of this? What should the university make of this? Basically, we're telling stories, and this turns out to be the greatest heritage peony collection in North America, bar none. That is peonies before 1950. Next image, please. It's beautiful. Come immerse yourself, revel in it. But there are nearly 700 plants. They're all in pairs, kind of like the ark, 2 by 2. Dr. Upjohn was a scientist behind it, and what good was looking at one? You needed to look at 2 to compare them. That's basic introductory science. There are all kinds of themes through here. And this is one that we've worked with some of our students, including at School of Information, about how would we have, say, a big laminated sheet, ledger size, with some themes on one side and some details on the back. And this is the fun one of influential women, or why are these women important in European history, because most of these peonies are from Europe and North America from the 1820s and on. This is ideal for moving into some kind of digital engagement, story map, or app. They're great stories. Next image, please. I have to admit, I'm of an age and experience when I hear undergraduates walking through and seeing this peony, Mrs. Franklin D. Roosevelt, and they go, who was she? That I realize that the generations have moved on. But there are plenty of others that the same could be said of me when I look at this and I don't realize who the woman is. Why don't we know more about these women? Lots of these peonies are named for women, and about half the peonies in this garden are, our plants are the only ones known remaining of that particular named form anywhere on Earth. Next slide, please. I work with Dr. Carol Dickerman, a retired historian, I believe French history, and she worked through over 4,000 lines of the International Peony Registry, trying to figure out the gender, if she could, by name, of the breeder of peonies from the 1820s to 1950. In North America, she is able to come up with 20 women did the breeding. All the other hundreds, I think it's 487, were men, and we were figuring out when they were introduced, whether they're still in the trade, and whether or not we have them, because we'd like to have a representative collection from a variety of different research and storytelling needs. So of the 20 women breeders, how many do you think we have of the best historic reference collection of the era? Next slide, please. Just as if you were a librarian or an art curator, you need the statistics. Don't worry about the numbers. The big thing is red. We have 2 of the 20 women. We're by the percent of different kinds of peonies we have, we should have at least 9 of them. In other words, our collection somehow became skewed, whether that was Dr. Upjohn or subsequent generations. And it has to do with how peonies were ranked in the trade at the time. Having worked with a U of M student in statistics who later did his master's in applied industrial statistics here, we had a great time breaking this one down. And it's a great way to launch students into their careers in actuary science. Deal with the data. Next image, please. So we're looking for these, but where would we put them? The peony garden is full. This is a bird's eye view of the peonies beds. The hospitals are to the left. The main part of the arboretum is to the right. And each one of those pink beds is about 25 to 30 feet on a side. They're not quite square. Each holds 30 peonies, 15 kinds, 2 by 2. And we've done a little bit of arranging over the years. They're functionally random, but the bottom tier of peonies you see there, we've given themes, including Japanese peonies and Chinese peonies. And in the woods by green, we've been introducing the tree peonies that are beloved, but were never, that is in world culture in North America, but were never planted, even though they're on the original 1928 map. Next image, please. So we have a story. It's a narrative. When you start looking at Asian cultures, where peonies have been domesticated and prized as elegant flowers of great social stature, that cultural history goes back over 2.5 millennia. This relatively recent image here from the 1790s. I wish U of M owned one of these, but it doesn't, so I found the one from the Metropolitan. The Freers is not online that I could tell. It shows a peony show staged. The peony plants were dug, put into where they could be seen, and then everyone came admired. Intriguingly, it's women who are shown admiring them, even though men prized growing them. But the key point is it's the tree peonies that are prized in Asian culture, and that's what you see in all the textiles and art. Ours are herbaceous peonies, and in Japanese, Chinese, and in Korean society, they are medicinals. That's why I suspect Dr. Upjohn was working with them. Next image, please. We do have tree peonies. We're putting them in, not only Chinese and Japanese ones, but also ones bred by Europeans and Americans, such as this guardian of the monastery. They're gorgeous in bloom. They're very fleeting. That's part of their appeal. And to give you a sense of scale, that's about 10.5 inches left to right across that flower. They are wonderful. Next image, please. But there were herbaceous peonies that were prized as ornamental flowers in Japan. We can find this from one of the recently published books on Japanese horticulture, which has some reprints within it. So from the 1680s, there were already groups of samurai who were breeding their own herbaceous peonies to appreciate and to have present at times, including during tea ceremony. It was part of them being sophisticated. We haven't found a single one, and yet you know they have to exist. And so finding these and putting the cultural story here is something that's important. Intriguingly, in the 1920s to 30s, the Japanese government was promoting the breeding of peonies for the North American cut flower trade. Now, how's that for one? And this very difficult to find book here on the right, there are only 3 copies of located in the US and Canada. We got one here and had one of our students who is Japanese working on translating key parts of it since it's never been translated to English. And the history it gives is slightly different than the history we find in Western sources. I tend to believe the Japanese on this one. Next image, please. So we want those peonies to tell the whole story. But importantly, what we also have are the thousands of North American peonies that were bred, of which we can only have a subset of about 350. We have some of the choicest rare herbaceous peonies from the 1850s to 1950 anywhere on Earth. This is one of the key breedings of Dr. Saunders very early. It was introduced in 1921. Can you see how the flowers are clustering as bouquets? If you're familiar with peonies, the top flower blooms first, and then the side buds bloom second. He tried to breed them so they all bred at once, so that the florist could have bouquets. He was so proud of it, he named it for his only child, his daughter Sylvia, and it was a complete dud on the market. It's so prized in various circles. We had it as an unknown until those who were helping us authenticate the collection came and said, that's not an unknown, that's Sylvia. She's that distinctive. Come and enjoy her. Next slide, please. Every one of these peonies has a story. But just as a great library, a great rare book room, or an art collection, we have to work within networks. Who else has peonies, historic, contemporary, Asian, or otherwise? So we've been building a network since 2011 in a national consortium of botanic gardens. We are the accredited holder of a historic peony collection in it, only one of 2. Swarthmore is the other, and we're building this entire network. But this network has to serve science as well as public horticulture. Next slide, please. Isn't this beautiful? This is by Otten of Illinois. It's called Do Tell, and it's a classic Japanese peony. And this is where we get into varying limitations of English. Japanese peony does not mean it's from Japan. It is this floral form where all the inner parts have been transformed into these dactyloid or finger-like or tongue-like structures in the middle. That's a Japanese peony. Most Japanese peonies are bred by Americans in the early 20th century. We have a great set. I would love to have some of the authentic original Japanese peonies from Japan going back to the 1400s for our genomic work. And by the way, do tell, I went to college in North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I sound like it when I wish. Do tell is really, with the right inflection, a way of saying, tell me the gossip. Doesn't this look like all the tongues of the local gossips just spreading the news before you can? I love the double entendre of these names. Now there's a whole nother story of great tour of the Peony Garden. Next image, please. So how are these peonies related to each other? And underneath it, what I'm looking for with other major garden conservators is the genomics of trying to understand how we conserve as many different kinds of plants with as few plants as possible for conservation studies and for the world ahead. We can't take every historic peony with us. So how do we maximize diversity? And it's got to be genomics. Next image, please. And we'll pick right up. You don't need to deal with trying to figure out the little graph here. It's basically a family tree of peonies working with Dr. Nastasia Vlasova from the Academy of Sciences of Belarus and a pre-med student here at U of M in the Department of Cellular and Molecular Biology. This tree that we have of the genomic work is revolutionary in several ways, and it completely explodes part of the classic classification scheme. This is exactly what we want, this sort of the different branches and how to understand them with ever more depth. Next slide, please. And by the way, that student is now a medical student at Case Western Medical School. The admissions committee loved that he was working on this sort of a project in the undergraduate research opportunities here at U of M. This kind of work, you need to amplify certain genes. It's very precise work. Here you see mostly replicates of the two peonies side by side. They should be identical. Next slide, please. This generates a huge amount of data. This is just particular markers, the different peonies, and right now this table is over 80,000 cells big. It is too much for any human to comprehend. You have to deal with data and metadata and informatics. Where else but U of M? Next slide, please. And I just color-coded that one. Then something really strange happened. This is a bird's eye view of the peony garden. You can make out the beds barely, and the yellow and blues are the same plant together, left and right. Same with the greens or the greens and reds. And these are different viruses. There was leftover DNA in the test tubes, almost literally. And Nastasia, being a virologist originally in Belarus, started reassembling them and running them against the National Institutes of Health Library of Gene Bank. And there are at least 5 viruses. There may be 7, there may be more. We haven't gone through everyone. Many of them have no symptoms whatsoever. But what's weird on the map on the right is these plants, we know exactly when they were planted. This is a long-term longitudinal study Dr. Upjohn set up without knowing it, or maybe he did. These viruses move at up to 2 meters, that is a little over 6 feet a year in the soil nematodes. Where the colors aren't the same, a yellow and a blue, one's infected and one's not. Are they truly not infected? Did we not pick the virus up? Think of COVID testing as just the way it is. The reds and purples up there, some have up to 4 virus condition states. What's going on? Why aren't they all spreading uniformly? Next slide, please. This is making no sense whatsoever, but as a conservator, this is one of the things I'm concerned about. In this data slide, I only care about the green dots. On the picture is what a virused peony looks like for tobacco rattle virus, a very common virus. That symptom only shows for about 3 weeks. If you don't catch it in the 3 weeks, you'll never visually know. In other words, the virus DNA is there, but the signal to us to see it is fleeting. When we look at the green dots, you'll see they cluster differently. Just like COVID-19, they're different strains. Tobacco rattle virus has been introduced to our garden at least 3 times. Where is it coming from? Why is it infecting some? Now we're into geospatial mapping, and we're trying to deduce migration, or how this very slow epidemic or non-epidemic of 5+ viruses is spreading across the peony garden. And we want to have the interactions of the genomes of the peonies. Next image, please. It's just a lot of fun. It's a huge amount of data. We're working with the faculty in the School of Information. A graduate student has been working with us half-time for almost a year, trying to do the data architecture, because this is needed for the National Science Foundation and other fields. Very few groups have tried to work through how do you pull all the data fields together. and manage them coherently and interpret it to the public. After all, everyone wants to see the peony gardens. Next slide, please. These are the current collaborators, mostly in the U of M, not all. And I just want to say we're not done, and we're missing, other than Museum of Art, most of the humanities. Hello, next century, plus even more of this. Next slide, please. Who would ever have thought of this? Now we have to explain it to the public. I've co-authored 2 peony books. The Passion for Peonies has come out with U of M Press. And by the way, there's a 40% discount and free shipping with the link provided. And the other one, Peony, the Best Varieties in Your Garden. I do enjoy writing, and this one made the New York Times Best Summer Reads in 3 years ago. Next image, please. So we have to engage people. We're all starved for social interactions. We've worked with School of Music, whose Indish I did not have, or logo I did not have in the last slide. I just realized that. The Centers for Chinese Studies and others to have a Chinese flower festival music in the Peony Garden. Next slide, please. And as we're doing all of this work, it's because there have been visionaries who have helped fund us. And I want to give a special thanks to Martha Parfit and the members of the W.E. Upjohn family. Those you see listed here, I know most by first names. Milka has helped us with the undergraduate research. This has been phenomenal. And then the foundations that you see. Next slide, please. On June 5th, 2022, we will have our centennial celebration of the Peony Garden. It's going to be the biggest event the Matthi Nichols has ever pulled off in its history. It's going to be exciting, and it's the pivot from building this great legacy collection to an interdisciplinary arts and humanities tool for the university in the century ahead. This could be nowhere else but Michigan. Next slide, please. Thank you. Over to the program, folks.
Great, thank you, David. As you can see, the peonies are indeed beautiful, but it's beauty with purpose. With this collection, we further scientific research and student opportunity. Obviously, we create narratives and stories to shape the visitor experience. And we also engage in leading practices for conservation. So it's, as David said, it's work that can only happen at the University of Michigan. It builds futures that would never have been possible without the legacy established by the Upjohn and Parfit families and their ongoing support. And I again want to thank you all for including us at Matthi Botanical Gardens and Nichols Arboretum today. And more importantly, for the features you, the Monteith Society, catalyze across this campus and beyond. And just a reminder that our peony garden is open right now, and next year will be the garden centennial. And we invite you all to visit and participate. So thank you. Sally.
Thank you, David and Tony. That was fabulous. We do have a number of questions that have come into the Q&A. One, Tony, you've just sort of addressed right now, will the Peony Garden be open this year?
Yes, of course, we're observing all policy, all university and CDC recommended public health policies. But yes, absolutely, it remains open.
Great. I'm looking forward to it myself. So a few questions. How is the ARB able to thrive with a minimum of pesticides?
Great question. And in the 99 years of the Peony Garden, I believe it's been fertilized once, and that was the year it opened. Peonies are naturally resistant to most pathogens and herbivores, bar a couple of them. And we don't fertilize or fungicide or pesticide or in any way treat them other than once a year, giving them a light dressing of composted wood chips. And the main reason for that is so that the undergraduates up at Mary Markley and all in the fall, when they come into the Arboretum, don't treat it as a Frisbee field because they damage the peonies. I've seen that, thank you. And so in part it's to demark it. But peonies some people have asked, they will do well if you fertilize them with a bulb fertilizer, particularly very early in the spring before they come into bloom, or as well as in the fall. But they're basically very long-lived perennials, easily living a quarter of a millennium. They are actually fire adapted, most likely, is the current theory, to the Mediterranean climates. The peony lineage by the molecular markers is thought to have split within the flowering plants about 100 million years ago. It's an extremely ancient lineage. You can think of there's some other what I'll call living dinosaurs, and peonies are one of them. And it's phenomenal. And one of the thoughts is they may have outlived a lot of their predators. It's also probably why they're medicinals in Asian culture. But I know there'll be more questions about that. I can go down every rabbit hole we want and have a great time, and every question will get asked and we'll get responded. And if we don't have time today, there'll be a follow-up with responses. So Sally, back to you. You just have to keep me under control.
Well, luckily, we have plenty of time for questions. So, in the past, have we had a peony sale to the public?
There was a peony sale.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a question, follow up with that is that still ongoing?
No, we don't sell out of the peony garden. There was a peony sale before I became curator when the Arboretum Gardens were still separate, and it was done as a fundraiser and a public engagement opportunity. There are two reasons why we don't do it. The number one reason is we have to think carefully about why we liquidate university property and why would we would be doing this. Yes, you can divide them. Yes, they clone. Yes, they'll grow back. But we now know just over half of these are known nowhere else on Earth. So they really belong in specialty collections. I hate to say this, but one of the problems of botanic gardens is when you get really rabid athletic supporters who it turns out tend not to be members of the university society, will sometimes try to inflict pain and agony on the other campus by spraying herbicides. If someone were to spray herbicides and we lose something here, it doesn't do to have a backup somewhere in town. We need it somewhere else in the world in case an epidemic shows up. So this strategic element is we need to get the key ones backed up somewhere else, far enough away that if something happens regionally, we don't lose it. The second one is at the time, nobody knew there were these silent viruses. In the nursery world, you have to do virus-free stock. These are not virus-free stocks, so we have no ethical stand to take in defending why we would just divide up plants which the USDA or the Department of Agriculture Michigan would not allow into the commercial trade. They're perfectly fine, they're healthy, they're beautiful, it's just they don't meet the legal requirements of what would be appropriate. So I hope that answered the question. And it was done at the time out of well-intended spirit of let's engage the community. And that's really important. We do have a peony sale. It is of plants of the same kinds found in the garden, not all of them, but we work with commercial suppliers to do that. And after all, why not support the green business in our region to grow plants that are beloved rather than us giving them away, in essence, or selling them? Let's support the market society out there.
Excellent. Next question. What is the rarest color of peonies in the world, and does U of M have one?
Good question. Historically, it isn't the question of rarest, it's the most desirable, and that's yellow. And we have both yellow tree peonies and yellow herbaceous peonies from a Chinese set that we received from one of the Chinese botanic gardens just before diplomatic relations went so difficult of recent years. But the rarest color is what I will call, well, blue doesn't exist. That's what everybody wants in peonies. It's called, you always want what you don't have. But within the tones, it's these warm coral colors They turn out to be very unstable in peonies. That's been the quest for the Holy Grail. There are a couple of good modern coral colors. But one of the things that comes up in peonies is that you and I love them as flowers, but the business world that creates them is creating them for the bridal flower trade. And so perfection in peony bud is more important necessarily than color. And it takes about 12 years minimum to get into the business cycle for this. And bridal fashions change. And this is something Tony alluded to. I would love to be working with a professor or a student professor group in women's studies, because these peonies in the peony gardens are the ones you see behind me in this screensaver. They were basically bred for Victorian to Edwardian bridal events. So what does that say about what the bride was wearing or what the bridesmaids was carrying? So for the rarest color, it shifts over time, and at times it's sheens that are wanted. And the sheens on a peony are not a pigment. It's the very top layer of cells, the epidermis, has curvature of each cell, and it kicks the spectrum back differently. And so what you're seeing as a color shift is actually just a microscopic texturizing, probably single point mutations of the epidermal cells. So we get into all of these nuances of rarest, but for what event, for what social construct, and being bred by men who are trying to make money. It's a really great moving target, and which ones are fragrant and which ones aren't fragrant and which ones have strong stems and which ones flop over. Think about Victorian table arrangements. You can't see on my hands where the vases themselves are already 2 feet tall, so the flowers have to be taller, about a boutonniere. There's all kinds of social dynamics about class status and your social position with how you're bearing this, and as you have here, the rarity of the color of the year. Wow, how is that? Great question. So what we're trying to have is everything, but we want to have special depth in North American breeders, and in particular, pick up some of the women who are currently missing. Next one, please.
To touch on something you just said, we have another question. Have peonies ever been bred for their fragrance?
Yes. Short answer is absolutely yes. And one of the things, mostly the tree peonies, mostly in China, not so much in this country. And part of the reason is, as I understand it, another great question there, is gender differences in the perceptions of aroma. That's known, at least by, I should say, reputed in the trade to be strongly gender biased, with women liking a wider range of the aromas than men. And I will say that if you do want to come into the peony garden for the aromas, come early in the mid-morning. A lot of the aromas are, they're very complex and they volatilize. So notice we're into organic chemistry and decomposition as they oxidize, because the buds are holding them together. As they open up, the fragrances are released. So if you come by late afternoon and look at it, it really smells, the term in the trade is dog breath. They have denatured to the point that they're sour. And so people will come in mid-afternoon in the middle of the sun and just go, I thought this was going to be really sweet, but it's kind of off. And it's called, you're at the wrong time. Yes, so they have been bred for that. We don't happen to have those. Good question.
Great. Next question. Can you provide more information or examples about how different schools and colleges at the university work with the peony gardens?
Sure, there's one that I would like to have, and in a moment I'm going to turn it over to Tony of some of his visions. But 2 years ago, we had some students in dance and music from here at U of M and at Eastern as individuals, not as a class project, wanting to do a competition film, 4 minutes long. They shot it at night, under lights, and during the daytime. It's a very student-y link. I sent it to, actually that, I don't mean to sound derogatory that way. It's very creative. I think it's a blast. It's out there on YouTube, but we can put the link in at some point. But I would love to see us being much more involved with a number of the humanities. And once Tony's had some things to say, I'll talk about the current project with College of Engineering.
Sure, thanks, David. Yeah, there's the specific case of the peonies, but I guess the answer I'll give is a bit larger than that in terms of the future of MBGNA as Matthew Nichols as a place. We have a long history of deep research engagements with faculty. We host a lot of classes and make a lot of curricular connections. David and others teach in the programs across campus and sit on committees for our students and things like that. So we're very much integrated into the curricular and the research life of this university. And it tends to be focused primarily in the places you would expect: horticulture, to some extent virology and neurology, or not neurology, excuse me, virology and other places like that, as David alluded to today. But really, we have a deep educational mission. We're one of the few places on campus that is a living laboratory, and where the veil between academic production, whether it's research or curricular work, and public impact, that veil is particularly thin in places like UMA, or in our case, us, or the Natural History Museum on campus. So we, with our sister organizations, are very much dedicated to bringing the whole heft of the university's scholarly production to our publics. The content we have is plant life. Its purpose is entirely cultural and social. So the peonies is a good example of that, and that's why we focus so much on the many kinds of narratives and the ways that we build experience through them.
So if I could launch in there, College of Engineering will come as the second case, not because it's second, but because Tony reminded me of one. So we're working with our colleagues in the Central Botanic Garden of the National Academy of Sciences of Belarus. One of their scientists is here now. I've been over there as well. There's a whole interesting phenomenon of why flowers like peonies are bred, and looking at a whole set that were bred in the Soviet Union, where some of you may recall, as I do, of Khrushchev banging a shoe, and that we were going to be buried. And one of the ways that Soviet superiority was going to be shown was in advances in ornamental horticulture. Looking at the Soviet breedings off of the same sorts that the Americans were doing, they come up with some interesting parallels and some very different ones, because it's a different market. They're being bred for state functions. This would be a great interdisciplinary one with, say, Center for Eastern European Studies, of putting peony iconography from a Slavic or a Russian or various perspectives into this political history. And when we look at the different peonies breedings with Nastasia and I and colleagues in the genomics, we can see how they're taking out of the ideology of the Marxist state, and they're using Russian species, because there are some Russian species in the wild. They're using Russian species, not Chinese species. I mean, it's just phenomenal. So there's that whole interaction of political history and culture, and now they're all beginning to get into the market worldwide. But back to College of Engineering. So the question was about fertilizing. Well, the faculty at College of Engineering have been looking at how we waste water in urban structures and cities and the systems, and looking sustainably. And to do a long story short, and there'll be interpretation in the garden this spring in it, they're looking at how can you recapture urine out of the municipal system and remove the nitrogen, because it eutrophies water. And the project is called P for the Peonies. Originally, there were going to be contribution stations, but COVID put an end to that. So they've had to synthesize artificial human urine in order to continue working on the tests. And so for the beds, we'll have the P of the Peonies, P for the Peonies long-term study. And we had to work it out so that study doesn't give us a complicator on the genomic study, because we have enough phenotypic traits. But don't you just love it? contribution stations for the peonies, but it solves several problems. We do need more bathrooms out there. So I just think this is great. So good question. And I'm sure there are more. I would love to see School of Music involved. We can get into rare book rooms and manuscripts. My own thought is really what doesn't have a tie to peonies? Maybe papyrology, maybe not. Back to you, Sally.
Okay. Do the various types of peonies planted in close proximity to each other create a cross-pollination problem that may dilute each variety?
Good question, and in the long run they could, but ours are very carefully mapped. So we have tried to rogue out the occasional seedling when they happen. But the other thing is these ornamental peonies, like the ones you see in the background in the picture behind me, they're sterile. In order to make all these extra petaloid parts, the reproductive, the sexual organ parts are transformed to being sterile tissue. And that's where some of the color values and the textures come in. So they have very limited ability to reproduce. But this is where the peony breeders pay a lot of attention, because even if only one flower out of 1,000 is functionally reproductive, that's what lets you get the genes out of it in a breeding program. So these would be watched like a hawk. So there's great interest in this as a genetic reservoir for breeding for future fragrance, for example, since most modern peonies aren't fragrance. Nasty and I kind of wonder if fragrance and viral susceptibility aren't linked somewhere in the genome. We would love to do whole gene sequencing, but that's a whole nother thing and would require some more engaging with the faculty, which, hey, it's U of M. Of course we're doing it. Next one, please.
Okay.
See, isn't this better than me just rambling on with more pretty pictures?
We're getting a lot more information for certain. What kind of effect is climate change having on the collections? Are there any environmental challenges that we have to accommodate?
Yes, and it's something that we looked at 9 years ago, trying to project what's the climate zone of peonies, and are we trying to basically keep something on an iceberg that's melting. Peonies are native to, well, there are 20-some species of peonies. As I've indicated, their lineage goes back 100-some million years. They are thought to be mostly of the arid zone, temperate interface, and probably always have been. Most species are Mediterranean or in mountain ranges that dry out episodically, except for one group from semi-arid parts of temperate China and that is Manchuria up into Siberia. I've seen them there in project with Russian Academy of Sciences some years ago. So they're cold hardy, but they actually deal with warm temperatures really well. Once we get to being warmer and humid in the summer than about Atlanta, Georgia, or Chattanooga, Tennessee, then the soils are too warm for them in the winter, at least the species we have. So who knows? We don't know what the future holds, but we think the next 80 years we're probably pretty good here. All the more reason for a network of gardens, not only across North America, but worldwide, with key taxa, key cultivars in them. Good questions.
Okay, a couple more questions. There can be so many people in the peony gardens at once. Even if everyone is careful, does the sheer volume cause any damage to the plants and the beds?
Sure, Dr. Upjohn was concerned about that. And it's why he broke them into beds. And if you think about the 1920s, you would have expected a Beaux-Arts design coming out of it. You would have expected something a little bit more curved, ornate, swirling paisley. He and Dr. Tialdi, the director at the time, did a very modern-esque, think of it as Mondrian-esque pattern. It looks to us just like a checkerboard, but if you put it in the aesthetic context of the time, it was bold. And it let him put everything in 2x2s. And part of the reason for the spacing is he wanted wide pedestrian boulevards between every bed. I think this was based on his own 14 acres, which he would open to the public on peak bloom. So he wanted people to be able to flow through it without having to knock the peonies down. but they're also those, I called them squares. They're slightly rectilinear. It's wide enough that people can walk between. Yes, it could be overdone. Yes, the grass looks like something at the end of the season, but the grass recovers by next year, and the peonies are doing just fine. So far we haven't hit a root compaction issue, and we know we have over 3,000 to 5,000 people on peak days, but people are being very well behaved.
Well, I'll just chime in real quick and say that one of the first things I learned about the virology project is that we have yet to identify what the actual vector is that's making it go from place to place to place. And as a father of two, my secret thinking is that it's toddlers that are just going from place to place and touching everything. But that's my guess.
That could be. Love the questions. Sally, are there others that you'd like us to address?
There are a few more. Do you know anything about the medicinal purposes that you mentioned earlier?
I have my thoughts, because if you look in the current NIH literature, peonies alone aren't thought to be efficacious for anything, but in all the materia medica, including contemporary ones in Asia, including in the literature, it's still used. I suspect it's not used by itself, but in conjunction with, I suspect, one, its very specific parts. I don't know what. It may be very sensitive to timing, to a matter of hours, and I suspect it's a blending. And that what we have is people going, oh, peonies are medicinals, as if it were tea. But from my own work in the Russian Far East with a group of doctoral level of pharmacology not students, but faculty doing the field collecting, and I was there for Taxol with the, ultimately with NIH, which we brought back to this country. That was the ostensible reason for it. I suspect that it's very precise timing of absolutely specific parts, and it may be how you process it. And any one of those goes wrong and it's not efficacious. So I think we just don't know enough rather than it's not potent. So that's what I think. That's not what I know. I don't know a lot.
Okay, next question. Actually, I think we might have time for just one more question. Are there some characteristics that can be altered by breeding?
Good question. Probably everything, given enough generations, other than the color blue. The easiest one to flip it is getting the color white. The color white in plants is the absence of pigment. There is no white pigment. It's like white paper. All the spectrum is reflected back. So the moment you turn off any part of the pathway to make a floral pigment, you get white. Getting for challenging, one of the things that's hard to do, but it's been done, is to suppress the side buds. If there are no side buds, the top bud is bigger and it sells for more. And importantly, in American economic system, you have to pick the side buds off, and that's migrant labor. And so if you can genetically get it so it's only the top one, then you are getting a better price for the flower. How's that for crazy? It's not crazy, it's market, it's reality. I love it.
Okay, one last important question. If there are restrictions on the number of people who can come into the garden at one time, should people make a reservation? Are there restrictions, and should you make a reservation?
So as it stands, the garden, we don't anticipate there being a volume where where meeting CDC and public health guidelines would be implausible. We are exploring a reservation system within we have one currently that we use for other things, but we are anticipating rolling that out as part of our reopening plan for some of the gardens at the botanical garden site. When it comes to the peonies, though, given that it's fully open air and we have no real meaningful way to control traffic, it's probably for the best that we don't try and enforce such a thing kind of superfluously on top of what we think is a manageable situation.
Great. Well, thank you very much. We do have a few other questions that we haven't had time to get to, but for the most part, those individuals included their names along with their questions, so we will try to follow up with you individually afterward. David and Tony, thank you so much for your expertise and enthusiasm. This is fabulous. I'm looking forward to seeing the peonies this year. Thank you to all of the Monteith Society members who've joined us today. Thank you for your generous support, your engagement with the university, and the legacy that you'll leave for generations to come. This concludes the formal portion of our event, but if you'd like to stay on the webinar, we'll have a slideshow of biographies honoring those donors whose bequests we received in 2020. So we appreciate that you were able to join us today. Thank you, and go blue.